Welcome back to the Ed Show. Thanks for watching tonight. In the Republican Party, what is old becomes new again. See, conservatives in the Tar Heel state of North Carolina are celebrating a victory for the so-called mainstream Republican candidate. Really? North Carolina State House Speaker Tom Tillis won the GOP Senate nomination with nearly 46% of the vote last night. He beat Greg Brannon, a Libertarian Tea Party activist backed by Senator Rand Paul. Well, the win prevents a July runoff, which, of course, would have drawn out the Republican race for another couple of months. Tillis will run against Democratic Senator Kay Hagan in November.
It's not the end of the primary. It's really the beginning of our primary mission, which has been the mission all along. And that is to beat Kay Hagan and to make Harry Reid irrelevant in American life.
Senator Kay Hagan called the election a choice between two different records. She said Tom Tillis has spent his time in Raleigh pushing a special interest agenda that has rigged the system against middle-class families. North Carolina, just for the record, has been one of the most radically divided states in this country, and really progressives have been attacked legislatively. Progressives organized what's known as a Moral Monday movement to protest issues ranging from a refusal of the Medicaid expansion to education cuts to limits on unemployment benefits to new voting rules. I mean, they have had it all in North Carolina. Joining me tonight for the Rapid Response panel, E.J. Dionne, Washington Post columnist and MSNBC contributor. Also with us tonight, Reverend Dr. William Barber, North Carolina NAACP president and architect of the Moral Monday demonstrations. Great to have both of you with us tonight. First of all, E.J., we'll start with you. Why is the term mainstream Republican candidate being thrown around right now when if you check this guy's record, he's as radical as anything they've got in the Senate right now on the right?
No, that's absolutely true. And the issue is compared to what? The Charlotte Observer had a great editorial on this yesterday where they said Tillis is seen as the establishment candidate in this primary, but his record and his rhetoric are clear. He is no moderate and could come across that way only when sitting next to Greg Bannon and Heather Grant, two of the out there candidates. But his views are pretty out there. I think the other lesson here is that the Tea Party is going to lose some of these primaries as they did yesterday. But my colleague Dan Baltz of the Washington Post has made the point that they've already moved the Republican Party to the right of where it used to be. Yep. And when you look at Mr. Tillis's record, whether it's on the Medicaid expansion or the voter suppression law, his opposition to a federal minimum wage, he is a very, very, very conservative candidate.
No doubt. Reverend Dr. Barber, what's your reaction to Tom Tillis winning last night? What does this mean for North Carolina? How tough a race is this going to be?
Well, you know, we don't endorse candidates in the NAACP, but let me say as Speaker, Tom Tillis being called a mainstreamer, well, there's a lot of green tea in that mainstream. It's been spiked. The reality is he oversaw a legislature that cut 500,000 people from Medicaid expansion. 9 Republican governors accepted Medicaid expansion. He took 900,000 people's earned income tax credit to give 23 families a tax credit break. Ronald Reagan supported earned income tax credit. When you're to the right of Ronald, when you make Ronald Reagan look like a liberal, then that's surely an extremism. He passed the worst voter suppression law we've seen since Jim Crow. He took 170,000 people's unemployment, cut public education to where we're now almost last in the nation, fired thousands of teachers. This is not some kind of mainstream or establishment candidate. As Speaker, he's been right there with the Tea Party extremists. I think he got one of the top awards from ALEC as a legislator, and so we cannot engage in this rhetoric. We have to look at the record. The record is what proves who you are.
Well, Reverend, wouldn't that record motivate progressives and Democrats to get out and do what they have to do in November? I mean, is this going to be in some way a motivating moment and a number of opportunities for the left?
Well, you know, sometimes I think people are missing what's really happening here in North Carolina. We had 13 Moral Mondays. By the end of that, 945 people arrested, but thousands of people turned out. In February, upwards of 80,000 people of all different colors, races, creeds, and parties, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, gathered. We're going back to the legislature on May the 19th of this month. There is an upswing. There is a tide. There's a pushing. We've even seen Republicans in certain counties who have said, listen, I'm not with this Tea Party the extremism. I've stood with Republicans in this state that have been against these Medicaid cuts and against the cuts in education. Yeah. So it's going to be a different day. You know, we're going to see a major turnout in a major way come this fall.
Major turnout. I hope so. EJ, in a recent poll, 45% of North Carolina voters said that the minimum wage should be raised to $10 an hour or higher. Tom Tillis had this to say about that. He said, I think for the most part, the market needs to define that. When we create artificial thresholds, then you run into a big problem. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think the minimum wage is a winning issue pretty much all over the country. There are plenty of people who may be conservative on this or that issue, but if you ask the basic question, should people who work every day get paid something much closer to a living wage, the answer is yes. It's a conservative value that you ought to be paid for if you work. But also on your point about mobilization, and the Reverend Barber has led an extraordinary mobilization down there, I think this is going to be the first electoral opportunity to cast a ballot on what's been happening in North Carolina over the last couple of years. And so I think...
What about that, Reverend?
Well, I think you're exactly right. When we were mobilizing, the people who were fighting for unemployment, fighting for Medicaid, Tom Tillis called us whiners and losers. Literally, he referred to people who had lost their jobs as no fault of their own as whiners and losers. Well, I think the people he defined as whiners and losers are going to wind up at the polls in a mighty way, and they're going to vote like they've never voted before. He has 63% name recognition, but in one poll, he has only 21% favorable. We don't endorse, we don't tell people who to vote for, but we will certainly tell people how the candidates have voted so that they can make an intelligent decision.
Well, E.J. Dionne, history is not on their side for turnout. Do you sense it might be different?
Right. Well, that's what I was saying, is precisely because there's been so much mobilization in North Carolina, and precisely because there is such a strong reaction, not only from progressive voters, but from a lot of middle-of-the-road people in North Carolina who really think this government of theirs has gone way to the right of that state's recent traditions. They're going to be looking for an opportunity to express themselves. So, yeah, Democrats in general may have a turnout problem, but I think it's going to be less in North Carolina because of the nature of this government and the fact that Mr. Tillis played a central role in it.
North Carolina just as hot as Florida, vice versa. Great to have both of you with us tonight. E.J. Dionne and Reverend Dr. William Barber. Certainly we'll have you all back. Thanks.